Welcome to Empowering Innovation, Trends and Triumphs, a podcast series dedicated to the success and challenges in innovation and growth within the UK tech startup scene.
So the purpose behind this second part of the podcast is looking at, well, what are the considerations for the organization for how the finance function can support the scaling of the organization. So, we're looking at business being at a point at which there is, you might have had an additional funding round. You might have had some, you're now looking at maybe expanding the territory within which your service or product is delivered. You might be looking at adding another product line in, but there's, some sort of milestone that you've gotten to and you're now considering, there's going to be a change within the financial structure within the business. So we'll be talking through with Chris how we go about operationalizing a larger finance function, but also what this larger finance function means and why it's important.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I guess a common challenge that finance teams and businesses struggle with is when to dedicate some budget to kind of growing the finance team further. Mm-hmm. I think often you'll hire that first person and then they may quite quickly say, oh, I need to hire someone else because we're expanding internationally or we're expanding to a new geography and we need to set up some new invoicing processes because the way the invoices need to be raised is slightly different, or we have a bunch of things that are unpaid, or we have a whole load of suppliers. Every time we do this new thing, we need to bring on a bunch of extra new suppliers. That's very common with marketplaces, for example. And I think often founders will turn around and immediately be like, but I just hired you and you're really expensive, so can't you just do it? And it's a tricky conversation to navigate. But I think if you trust the finance lead that you've hired, I think you need to try and make sure that they're not weighed down by admin. Mm-hmm. I think and I guess this is perhaps how you should think about scaling the finance function more generally, is where are your big admin time sinks and how are they going to change as you pull different levers around the business? And you want to make sure that you're supporting your finance function to eliminate that admin. And it could be that the finance lead is asking to hire someone to remove one of those admin sinks, but like something you could also do is just helping to kind of reconfigure the business in some way. Maybe the sales team can trigger invoices from the CRM, sure. Or maybe the tech team can build some sort of invoice chasing mm-hmm. module. And yeah, I guess don't just say you're now dealing with everything cash related. Keep some ownership yourself.
And to what extent would you, as the business moves into scaling, to what extent would you expect the finance function, which may at this point be one individual, albeit an experienced operator, expanding the finance function to take on more niche tasks versus bringing in external support or experts to cover off, individual initiatives?
Yeah. So I guess the key thing that I think the finance lead should be doing is formalizing. I think we touched on it in the last part, is formalizing how the business makes decisions and making sure that there's a really consistent process for setting expectations, seeing what actually happened, and then refining your expectation setting process. And I think kind of reaching out into the business and making connections is what your internal hire should be focused on. Mm-hmm. In terms of getting support for other aspects of growing, no individual will know or have experience of everything. And mm-hmm. particularly at that early stage where you've perhaps hired someone who isn't been there, seen it, done it, IPO'd a business CFO, bit more junior, they're there to figure things out. You need to let them lean on other experts perhaps who can advise on US sales tax or can advise on R&D returns for larger businesses. I guess with all this stuff, it's always the budget and what value we're going to get back from it. And it's often a tricky internal challenge, I think, for the founder to give budget where there's not obvious ROI.
So would you expect at those, for a business of this size, for the founders to be, I guess, expecting the finance function to do a lot of this in-house themselves, right? To prove the value as opposed to going out and getting support from elsewhere?
I think it depends like how specialized your business is. I think like generally you should be able to rely on your finance lead to do 95% of things. I think the main thing you'd have is an external accountant to file your accounts. I think you want your in-house person to be an operations expert, and they're great at setting up the processes, making sure other teams are happy. You don't necessarily care as much about them being an accounting expert who's all over all the accounting standards and that kind of stuff. You just want them to be able to work with an external accountant and also an R&D specialist to kind of do the things they need to do there. I think the only other place that a business may need external support is tax. I think other than those areas, the internal capacity should be able to deal with almost everything.
Fine. And then when we're looking at sort of, I guess starting to scale that function, we be saying, I'm trying to see if there's a magic decision point, right? Where you decide actually what we need to do is hire somebody and another person into the finance team now to expand that, or actually do we now, get another fractional individual in and then build that fractional individual over time?
Yeah. So a model that I think works relatively well, or I've seen work quite well, is the first hire is kind of on the bottom end of senior, and so they've had a few years in startups and they can bring their experience. Then the next hire after that, I think, it's quite good to be a freshly qualified accountant, so straight out of practice, perhaps Big Four, who has no startup experience, but they're just fairly switched on and often very career driven. And so often businesses at this stage will have a bunch of admin work to churn through, and often the admin work, although on the surface is very simple, and these businesses or founders will often lean towards, we can just hire a junior person to do all that. No, it's helpful to have someone who's kind of post-qualified, switched on and very driven, because then your finance lead doesn't need to manage them as much, and everyone can operate a bit more independently, and things will move forward just a bit quicker and more reliably.
And this comes back to your earlier point about, as you scale as an organization, what you want to do is, there are cottage industries that develop within an organization, and what you want to do is try to just get rid of those to as much as possible, to provide your decision makers the ability and the time, the bandwidth to be able to make the decisions, and actually maybe bringing in a junior, career-driven, bright individual can take on some of the more legwork, right, to free up this individual that's had X period of time and experience within the organization already, to be able to identify opportunities for faster growth, cost cutting, or how to deliver a wider initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think going back to what you were saying, though, like that person can be fractional initially, and you can again follow a similar model where the lead is supported by some fractional support. I think though, what I've often seen is that fractional kind of person below the lead will generally be a crutch because the founder doesn't want to invest fully in really, you're not investing in the lead and sort of lifting them up by giving them the support they need. And I think like having an initial team of 2 who can work well together is a great core to then start tinkering around the edges with, there's this project, let's bring a bit of fractional here, let's bring a bit of interim here to kind of work things, push things forward. I think that, like everyone likes to have someone to soundboard off, right? Businesses are often better founded by more than one person, purely because you can just talk through ideas with people. And I think it's the same is true in a finance function. Just giving your lead another switched on individual to be their number 2 is super valuable.
I mean, what are the sort of challenges do you see the scaling finance function sort of face, or the finance function face within a scaling organization?
The classic challenge is spend. So you've typically been fairly you're building the plane as you're trying to take off kind of thing. You've then taken off, but the plane's still not fully built. But while you've been taking off, the founder's been happy to be like, yeah, buy this, buy that. Yeah, we're okay to spend on that. Let's just give the sales team a card so that they can close deals. Let's give the tech team the card so they can just sign up subscriptions rather than have this blocker where we all need to chat about things. You'll then, and that's fine initially because you really trust the CTO and you really trust the head of sales. Once you then hire kind of 2 or 3 other people out in the business, you lose a bit of trust, you lose a bit of control. And the classic challenge that the finance function needs to deal with is how to get the business under control. How do you stop the junior salesperson from buying a £1,000 dinner to close an account that doesn't really need it? And yes, you can try and sort of berate the head of departments, but they're all busy doing their own thing. And it's on the finance team to kind of bake that control in. And I guess alongside that, in parallel, is how do you build relationships with those functional leaders to then start kind of a consistent budgeting and planning process? How do you get your sales team to tell you how much they think they're going to sell? And when they do or don't sell that much, how do you go back to them and say, oh, well, you did or didn't sell this much, and that is or isn't good enough. Let's figure out how to improve things going forward. And that will happen across every area of the business. And I think you generally want your finance team in tandem with your operations. And I think that's why it's often good to have your finance and operations people sat together. You want them to be sucking up all the data around the business, collating it into, or feeding it through the model for how you kind of do your forecasting, and then telling you, oh, these are the assumptions we made, this is what did or didn't happen. Therefore, we think, because we know the model best, you can pull these levers and then you'll be able to hit your targets. And so I think, I think a fairly long answer to your question.
No, it's
control and kind of partnering with the business.
Well, those are 2 core challenges. Yeah, you see that function, and I guess technology plays a part in enabling both of those back into the business, right?
Yeah.
So having greater transparency, therefore control and visibility into some of the decision making further down in the business as you grow, and then just the management, the data collection on the operational side.
Yeah. So a lot of the day-to-day processes, hopefully you've already set up software to manage that. I think your spend management or your invoice processing should scale fairly well, but certainly through like this stage of the business. kind of, few hundred employees
Mm-hmm.
and even beyond. I think the key bit of software that you'd need to think about or consider is your planning software. And I think how your finance team interacts with different areas of the business and how different areas of the business know what their budget is.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, sales team, you have £1,000 a month to spend on client entertainment. How do they know how much they've spent? Because when it gets to the end of the month, they'll often say, oh, can I take this person out? And actually you want some software that kind of gives them
Mm-hmm.
their budget information. And that's where you often get into the realms of an ERP, which is a big scary word that it means enterprise resource planning. And that's where you go from your accounting software being in Xero or QuickBooks to like Oracle and Microsoft. And there's often quite a big gap there.
Mm-hmm.
So Xero and QuickBooks are essentially free, maybe like 30 to £100 a month. And then the ERPs are easily over 1,000 a month. They'll generally be quite complicated to set up. You'll need to pay consultants to come in and do all this stuff. And I think that's probably your biggest software decision, if or when to get an ERP, really.
Perfect. So great. That's been super helpful. Like one of the things we've not had a chance to really touch upon, but it's the £800 gorilla in the room, right?
Yeah.
It is the investor and the effect that an investor has on how soon and how much an organization leads into the finance function, often for reporting aspects, often for the metrics, and just the transparency around the numbers. So it would be great to get your thoughts on sort of the impact that having an investor has on the finance function as well.
Yeah, and I think the relationship between a business and its investors is really interesting and is often similar to the business and the finance team. It can often be a love-hate relationship where I think you often hear founders complaining about how either the board doesn't add value or is actively detracting value by asking kind of questions that send you off going left, right, and everywhere, and actually you're not then able to focus on what you need to focus on. I think obviously the primary relationship between the finance team and the investors is reporting and making sure that the investors have the reports at the cadence they want, which I've seen everything from kind of weekly flash reports on sales all the way to they don't really care and you just sort of send them reports whenever you want, really. I think you ideally probably want to be sending them reports every month. You should probably be having a board meeting every quarter or so. And I think to start owning that relationship, I think rather than which being owned by that relationship, which I think is very common, I think or something that I've often seen not done very well, is giving the finance team the empowerment to speak at the level of the investors. I think often you have investors, founder, finance team, and the investors will get frustrated or request things from the founder. Mm-hmm. And then the founder won't really quite understand what is possible or what the investor's really asking. And then they'll then communicate something to the finance team. The finance team will produce something. There'll be some inherent assumptions or some things that could or couldn't be done within what was produced. And you go back up via the founders to the investors, and the investors will be like, this isn't what we asked for, or you haven't taken this into account, or all these issues. The reaction of the founder is often then to get panicked and get frustrated that the finance team hasn't supported them in the way that they're expecting, because the finance team's supposed to deal with all that stuff. And I think the issue is often because the finance team hasn't just been able to talk to the investor and say, hey, this is what is or isn't possible. This is what we think, like, we're able to produce, we're not able to produce. And often investors, because they will have a finance background, will want to get into the nitty gritty of the model and be like, oh, like, how did you do X, Y, Z? Or, like, how are you forecasting this? Mm-hmm. And giving the finance team the ability to informally just chat to your investors, or maybe the investment associate at the VC or the PE firm, you create this ongoing conversation so that when you get to the board meeting, all of the finance bits have been worked out, and the board meeting is then just sort of at a high level talking about the outputs of the models, rather than, I think often you can get to the board meeting and then there'll be a question about the model, and then you'll be like, oh, I don't know, and then the whole meeting's kind of gone. I think that's the kind of the most important thing to consider.
Fine. So the importance of having the finance function being represented at those board meetings, hugely valuable, as opposed to having the founder being a conduit of the message.
Yeah.
Right.
And being just open about, are these reports good enough? Are they not good enough?
Mm-hmm.
I think often speaking as a finance person, you'll hear there's issues in the board, but you'll never really know like why, and you never have the opportunity to ask, to kind of iterate, and
So so engaging them within the relationship with your investor.
And not being afraid that the finance individual isn't senior enough to talk to the investor. Just because they're less or as senior as you doesn't mean that they can't also have a productive conversation. I think people often wait to get this
perfect CFO,
this 60-year-old CFO who's probably got some white hair, who's IPO'd a business, who I think they're waiting for that person to come along to just magic away all of their board
reporting issues. And
actually, one that person is very difficult to find, and two, I don't think that person often solves that problem.
Sure, it's very helpful, and actually that goes into the final question that I have, which is all about what does success for a finance function look like in this in this part of the maturity of an organization as a scaling business.
Yeah, I guess a key thing to acknowledge is that nothing will be perfect yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think success is just that you're seeing continuous improvement within the team. I think everything will be changing around the finance team, and it's therefore expected that there'll be, like, you might send a payment to the wrong person because some processes have changed, or you might pay someone wrong. You might pay all of your employees incorrectly one month because X, Y, Z happens. I think the key thing is that if or when that does happen, your finance lead can deal with it well, and they're not fazed by it. They just sort of take it in their stride, and they've got a clear plan of how they're going to fix it going forward. I think, finance is scary, and paying people incorrectly is scary, but just like every other area of the business, things may go wrong, and it's just about making sure that you're always you're always moving in the right direction. I think within that, though, you want to be hearing good noises about the data is accurate. You want to make sure that you don't have your sales team constantly complaining that your revenue is incorrect, or your finance team vice versa. You want to make sure that you're getting consistent monthly reports, and that the numbers aren't changing too much, or if they do change, you have reasons why. And I think you want to be really feeling like you're making strong decisions. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to each month or whenever think, oh, should we hire this salesperson? And you want some numbers to back up whether you should hire them or not. Your finance team should be all over whether like the time to get a return on investment from a salesperson, setting up commission. And if you're finding that you can't make decisions based in reality, why is that? And is it you're not giving enough investment to your finance team, or is your finance team not operating as effectively as they should? Excellent.
Well, look, Chris, that's been super valuable, and I hope our audience has found that to be as valuable also. I'd encourage them to reach out to yourself and Laura as well, and to learn more about how they can progress on the on this journey to the building a finance function that is best of breed. In line with their growth aspirations. But again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
And we look forward to speaking to everyone here again in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks.
This podcast has been brought to you by Empowered, a platform and service for R&D tax credit claims.